What if the problem isn't you? What if you're in the wrong room? My suspicion? You're not broken and you don't need to be fixed. You have outgrown where you are. Let's get more space and freedom to redesign the life you deserve. Welcome to the Reinvention Room. I'm Allison Hare, coach for ambitious women making big changes, and we are rethinking everything we've been taught. Part pop culture, part real talk, and all smarter ways to live life on your own terms. What kind of feelings come up when I mention these names, these female celebrities? Meghan Markle, Hillary Clinton, Rosie O'Donnell, Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, Jennifer Lopez, Gwyneth Paltrow, AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yeah, I know you've got big feelings about these women, but why? What do they have in common? A big platform? They're all outspoken? Wealth, perhaps? They advocate for change. So why do we get so damn triggered? Well, we all have these celebrities that we just irrationally hate. Everything they do, everything they say, well, it's irritating. And listen, I get it. There are some people that are in my life that I cannot stand. And they have done absolutely nothing to me. In fact, I have had full therapy sessions talking about people that are so freaking kind to me, but I can't wait to get the hell away from them. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? So what if I told you that this has been so exciting and kind of interesting for me. I feel like I've seen so much come up with the fires in LA and Blake Lively. I mean, there are just so many things, the changing of the presidents. There's been so much that's come out here that has just kind of reinforced, like, this is a topic that needs to be talked about. And that is women hating women, if I told you that there are reasons, like way, way, way deeper reasons you and I may not have ever considered as to why this happens. And y'all, I have gone down a rabbit hole of research on this, and you are not going to be able to unthink about this. You are going to be completely blown away with some of the psychology behind this, as well as, identifying how much is rooted in our parents and societal norms. And you are going to walk away with today not being able to unsee this. I mean, certainly we're going to talk about examples of how this shows up in our everyday life, but also what can we do to help be part of the solution? Nobody wants to be hated. Nobody wants to sit around and hate people. Maybe you do. But I know for me, I hate it. I hate when I'm kind of trapped in these gossips and complaining about, everything that's going on. So I figured, why not do an episode about it? I've got to be honest here, though. I have been really resistant to do this episode, like even preparing for it. I've been procrastinating this. Like, this will come out on Thursday, which is January 23rd. And I'm recording this on January 21st, which is kind of rare for me. Because usually I have a ton of episodes in the can, but I like to be a little more ahead of it. But I'm recognizing how much resistance I have to talking about something that can be so controversial where I am going to be judged. So isn't that something that is kind of interesting, And so let's think about everyday examples of where this happens. First of all, it is like women criticizing women. If you watch any of the Real Housewives franchises, we love the catfights. We love the drama. We love when people just throw down. I was watching the documentary on Jerry Springer's show. You remember that show? I never watched it back then. And even now watching it, of women pulling their hair out and all of it feels like an adrenaline rush where you can't look away. And so the same thing happens with Real Housewives, where they're so unfiltered, but they can kind of tell people that they're ugly or they are rotten people or they're a bitch or whatever. And people really love it. And so I think the media representation is very interesting. When I think about this is so fascinating to me, and you're never going to not see this now. But when I look at the news, if you watch the traditional news and you see female reporters, male reporters, and you would see like a whole panel, kind of like a Brady Bunch screen of heads. And you would see the men where they look like they are literally taking a dump. Could not be uglier, bad lighting, balding, one hair here, one hair there. They look like they're farting. And the women have to have this like pleasant, resting smile. And I remember there was I think it was a midterm debate in Georgia between Raphael Warnock and Kelly Loeffler. Raphael Warnock is the congressman for Georgia today. But while he was running for this office, he was running against Kelly Loeffler, who is a blonde, very wealthy, attractive woman running for the Republican seat. What I thought was so interesting is that the critique on her was that she was so wooden. She was saying the same thing. And what I noticed, she would not, no matter what, where she would say, well, the radical left, the radical left, the radical left, the radical left, she would say the same things over, but she would say it with a nice, pleasant little smile. She would never break. She would never get angry. She would never get emotional, because that opens her to being too emotional, too much, too intense, too opinionated. It is not allowed for women. And so the media representation of the opposite, the polar opposites of being so poised and perfect and, being pleasant to look at and pleasant to never raise your voice, to all the way beating people up. It is a really interesting thing, and the place to judge all in between that. Then let's not even begin to talk, or we can begin to talk about body image and the scrutiny around that. So what has been interesting is watching Pamela Anderson. So Pamela Anderson is a beautiful woman in her 50s, and she has famously gone makeup free and said, I feel better this way. I feel so much better. And people are like, that's all they can talk about. You are so brave. You're so brave for showing your actual face when people love you with a fully made up face and beautiful and whatever. And now that you are no longer relevant, beautiful, whatever it is, that's all the implications of it. That body image is very interesting. I remember Pink had put on Instagram where she had a picture of her surfing, and there were so many critiques of, well, Pink gained weight. Now she's chunky. Look at her now. And she posted this and said, I'm so proud of my strong legs that I am able to surf like this. And I thought, you go, girl. But, like to be a recipient of that kind of scrutiny, no matter where you are, of just picking apart how you look. Then, thinking about Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields just released a book. It's called, what is her book called? Brooke Shields is Not Allowed to Get Old. One of the best titles I've ever heard. And the comment sections are ridiculous of, she aged badly. She should have just crawled under a hole. Why is she even out? Why can't she just do Botox? She has famously let herself get old and beautiful, and is still beautiful. She does wear a lot of makeup. She does, as I imagine, dye her hair, but she is not putting any of the fillers or plastic surgery to appear more younger, other than probably a lot of makeup. And so it's really interesting to think about Lizzo, and then people like, I think on the opposite side of the spectrum, like Elizabeth Hurley, the beautiful actress from Austin Powers, Paulina Poroskova, Christy Brinkley, Madonna, Jennifer Lopez. Like, these are women that have clearly used plastic surgery, whether it is obvious or not, but they have clearly kind of embraced that, where they truly look like they did 40 years ago. They look so beautiful. They look so tight, where people are hating on them. Like you can't win. And so people are saying, wow, you look so beautiful. It's almost like Martha Stewart being celebrated at 80, when she was on the cover of Vogue magazine at 81 years old in her bikini. The reason why she was celebrated was not like Betty White. Betty White was celebrated because of her spirit, because of her joy and her legacy of work, where Martha Stewart was like, what a hottie. She doesn't look 81. So we celebrate that she doesn't look her age. So it's really interesting, like the body image scrutiny, the ageism, all of that. And when I started to do some research, I'm getting all worked up. Then Justine Bateman has a book out called Skin, where she has famously kind of not done anything to her face, but her face is very wrinkled, and people have a lot to say about it. So I could go on forever with that. But I started doing some research, and I could not wait to share this with you because I thought it was such a nuanced way of exploring why do women tend to hate women. And I read this article. It was in Psychology Today. It was from a male therapist. And he was saying a lot of the vitriol stems from anxiety, and anxiety around inadequacy. So the majority of female criticism actually stems from feeling inadequate in any area of life where they value highly. And so he had gone on to talk about, he had a female client that is extremely critical of others' parenting styles, but is simultaneously having a lot of difficulty getting pregnant and with fertility. And so the way I thought about this, I tend to be really, 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 really critical of people that are flaky, that are late, that aren't responsive like I am responsive. But I have to admit, I used to be late to everything. I literally would get parking tickets because I could not get anywhere on time. I got fired from jobs, like they were restaurant jobs, but I got fired from jobs because I could not get anywhere on time. And then in my late 20s, I had made a really concerted effort where I am never late to anything. My mother was always late to everything, and it used to drive me nuts. And I felt like it was such a sign of disrespect that I was like, well, I am never going to treat anybody like that. And I'm going to be respectful of my time. And so I'm always on time. So I find myself being really critical. This is a value that's really high for me, is connection, and is communication, is super duper. It's one of my top values. And so when you think about what are your high values, do you tend to be more critical? Where I've had to literally talk myself down from a ledge of like, it's not you, it's not them. It is, just the way they operate. They operate in a different paradigm, and you cannot take it personally, and you can't necessarily judge them. It can allow me to kind of accommodate or adjust how close I get to them, because to me, that is the love language, is the communication. And so I have to like adjust my expectations from it. But I think that makes sense, that it stems from anxiety over feeling inadequate in certain areas where you feel higher. This I thought was so fascinating. Women who are mean-spirited about other women are often raised by a mother who probably didn't like herself and didn't feel warmly towards women. What did your mom think about other women? What was her relationship like? This was so fascinating to me. I try and be mindful of making comments about other women. I'll do it in front of my husband all day long. You see somebody on the news, say, I am not saying that I'm above any of this. I am petty as hell. And I can get all up in this, where I can make comments to my husband. but I don't want my kids hearing it. But at the same time, if that's how I feel, they're going to figure it out. And so I have to like adjust the sails over the kind of things that I say, when I see somebody on TV where I'll make those comments too. And so if I'm mean spirited about other women, that is going to be passed down. So I'm trying to remember, my mother was judgy as all hell. She really was. She had some really incredible friends that lasted her whole lifetime. And she had some friends that were there for a season and they were really, really close for a while. It's something that I personally, I don't know if struggle is the word, but really deeply investigate in my own relationships. But I know that my mother was really judgy. She had a lot of opinions, and especially if you didn't take her advice, she was like, I can't help you. You didn't do what I told you. You're in the same situation. And so I think there was a level of, I don't know if it's superiority, or even that sanctimonious kind of nature that I'd be curious to see. What did your mother think? And do you feel like that has kind of trickled down to how you are and how you parent if you are a parent? This was so crazy. There was another study that I found that said that women felt a deeper hatred when they had a higher emotional dependence on men. Wow. So I'm watching Shiny Happy People. I'm finally watching this documentary from many years ago. It is on the Christian fundamentalist, the Duggars. It's on the Duggar family, but the Christian fundamentalist. And imagine this is like a whole culture that is predicated on the emotional and physical dependence on men and spiritual, that of course you're going to be judging. Of course you're going to be judging people that may not measure up, if that's the case. So that was so fascinating to me. The other thing I couldn't help but think about is I was thinking about relevance. I was thinking about me at age 50, you at whatever age you're in. But I imagine that if you're listening to this podcast, most of my listeners are above 35. A lot of them are in midlife, right? And so the kind of big age bracket is 35 to 60, and 80% of my audience are female. And so I imagine I'm talking directly to you. But there is this societal pressure, norm, expectation that as you get older, you will be less relevant. You will be less visible. It is encouraged for you to be invisible because all of the glamour, all of the marketing is targeted towards younger people that have money, people that can spend money, which all of this is kind of crazy. But as I think about the dissonance between us wanting to never be invisible, wanting to matter, does it mean that our wisdom doesn't mean anything anymore? I think it is kind of the degradation of having generational families under one household, where in Europe and in other countries, it's very prominent. But here in America, it is not at all. And so with that break, of having this prime of your life is what they call it. What happens when you become invisible? And so that can show up in so many different ways, whether it is jealousy, whether it is wishing you had it differently, wishing ill on other people, which is one of those human kind of functions that, of course, you don't blatantly wish ill, but, what do they call it? Schadenfreude? It's that German word that means where you kind of get delight in somebody else's demise. And if you say that you don't get delight out of somebody's demise, you are lying to yourself. And that doesn't mean that that is a blanket true statement for everything, but it is built into our nature. It is kind of a survival thing. I think about the implicit bias and findings show that women may form negative perceptions of other women more quickly than men do of other men, indicating a potential implicit bias influenced by societal conditioning. So I wanted to kind of dig into some of the psychological studies and theories. Like when I think about, there's this 2012 study from a company or business called Snap, and that they said that young women with high family support and low levels of perceived sociocultural pressure from family, friends, and media regarding the importance of achieving a thin and beautiful ideal had a more positive body image, which makes sense, right? If it is not emphasized at home. I was raised in the 80s and I was always really like real thin, skinny. And to the point where my teachers would call my mom and say, "Is Allison okay? I'm worried she might be anorexic. She's so thin." And now watching my daughter, who has ADHD, I have been late diagnosed with ADHD, but my daughter's very, very small. She's very, very skinny. She barely eats because she hates everything. And as a kid, I hated everything. So I love snacks. I love sugar. People used to call me CF for candy freak because I loved all kinds of candy. I hated vegetables. I wouldn't eat seafood. I wouldn't eat onions. I have a very limited palate. And still to this day, I don't eat seafood. I don't eat a lot. And I was very, very skinny. And so the weight thing was not an issue for me personally. However, I know how many of my friends and peers had parents, especially in the 80s, that would say, "You need to be on Snackwells, the low fat Diet Coke. We always need to be on a diet." All of our parents were on diets. And at that time in the 80s, that's when low fat foods came out. And that is when this country became obese, believe it or not. And so it's been such an interesting juxtaposition over how we've been conditioned of what is thin, what is beautiful. I often tell of this story where I would go over a friend's house to sleep over, and I would sleep over. And this was not taught to me. This was not taught to me by my mother that I can remember. My mother wore makeup. My mother really loved to wear bright colors, which I guess that apple didn't fall too far from the tree. She did not dye her hair. She went full gray. And people would say, "Judith, why don't you dye your hair? You'll look so much younger," saying that she no longer is relevant, right? And she would say, "Well, this is my hair and I love it. I think we should go, be distinguished. Why do men have to be distinguished? I love the way it looks." And people would fight her on it and say, "But then you'll look so old." And she's like, "All right, I'll look old." And she really did. She looked old, pale, and dead. And for me, I am like dyeing my hair every 4 weeks. And there is so much that happens within our families. And back to that story, I promise this will all come back around. But back to that story about sleeping over. I remember I would have my purse next to my head while I slept. And in that purse was a little makeup bag. And the moment my eyes would wake up, I would pull out the makeup bag. I would take out my little compact mirror. I would put on eyeliner. I would put on under eye concealer always. I would put on mascara. I would put on lipstick and blush. And I would be willing to be shown for the day. And that has never changed. That has never changed. And it drives me nuts, like how much time. I mean, I enjoy, the makeup. I enjoy the art of it. But I don't enjoy how I look underneath it, especially as I age. And that is a challenge. And I think as we look at other people, some people that choose to get plastic surgery or dye their hair or not dye their hair or not get plastic surgery or fillers or Botox or wear a certain outfit or wear slinky things or wear heels or not wear heels. All of these choices are designed to help us feel better in our own skin. But when it is met with opposition, with critique, with criticism, as you get older, theoretically, you care less. I think the concept is that as you become societally invisible, it allows you to actually become completely visible to yourself, because then nobody cares anymore, which is a weird place to be, but it does allow you to meet yourself with yourself, right? And so let me talk about some of the psychological studies and theories that I found. First of all is intersexual competition. And so the research shows that women may engage in indirect aggression. And this can look like gossip, social exclusion as a strategy to compete with other women for potential mates, which I think is interesting. It can be interesting applied in business or in social settings as well. That can be criticizing somebody else's appearance, spreading rumors about their sexual behavior. This was especially true in the 20s, when people in your 20s, when people are dating, and then people have a lot of judgments on their promiscuity or their prudishness, and have critiques in between all of those. Then there's this part I think is really fascinating, is internalized sexism. Now, this is internal, right? Like, this is not something that we think about. It's not like a conscious bias unless you're really looking at it. And so women can internalize societal sexism, and we are seeing this. We are seeing this all over in social media, in the news, in our politics. We are seeing it in plain, blatant sight. This is no longer hiding the sexism of the negative attitudes towards women. And so this internalized sexism refers to when individuals internalize and believe negative stereotypes about their own gender, often stemming from societal sexism, leading them to judge themselves and other women based on these stereotypes. So think about if you're at work and somebody else gets a big promotion, another woman gets a big promotion, and your brain automatically thinks, well, she got the promotion, and that means it won't happen for me. There's only a limit. And really in the workplace, I mean, I think the statistic now is that only 30% of leaders are female. And even less, something like 12% are in the C-suite of the boardroom, right? And so if somebody gets it, it does feel like a real big scarcity mentality, right? And then, you could even think, well, she's much prettier, thinner. She is more smart and savvy and more strategic and has a better personality than I do. So of course, she has the advantage. She's prettier. She's younger. She's whatever. And then I think about the pick-me theory. This part is something that I deeply, deeply, deeply subscribe to, where as I look back, I've actually done some pretty deep therapy on this. And what I had found, I guess I'll just go there. What I had found is that I noticed a really intense trigger that I feel towards alpha males. And yeah, alpha males. Like my whole body bristles. And I couldn't understand why. I couldn't understand why, when people are nice to me, I'm all on guard. And they have that kind of very masculine, overly kind of extreme alpha male kind of energy. I don't love it at all. And I find that it completely, like I could feel it in my whole body that I'm completely bristling from head to toe when I'm in the presence of many alpha males. I shouldn't say all, and when I started to do some therapy around where is this coming from? These are people that have done nothing to me. They don't deserve it. And I think about how much I think about abandonment in my life, that my father is, I don't know if he's an alpha male, but culturally, he's from Lebanon. He is an immigrant. He was an entrepreneur, has run businesses. He was the head of our household in that, he provided for us. He was our stability, our security, where everything in my home growing up was from my mother, who is a stay-at-home mom of 6 kids. And so she literally did everything, where my father literally was the bank account. He was the paycheck. And he would travel all around the world. And when he would come home, he would be like Willy Wonka giving out presents, you know? And so we held him up to the biggest standard, where he did no parenting. My mother did all of it, right? My mother did 95% of it. And even my father, I interviewed him many years ago, and he's like, all the credit for you kids, that's all your mother. Your mom did all of that. I wish I was there more, you know? But my father, my father was gone all the time. And then when my father left, when my parents got divorced, my father left the country. And, you know, I tell this story often, but my mother would always implore in me and my sister, you know, she would kind of beat the drum of like, never rely on a man to make money, always make your own. And I really took that and internalized it as I saw her not make that choice and get screwed for the rest of her life with it. And she really, really suffered and struggled. And I watched it happen. And my father, you know, kind of has been taken care of his entire life. He's 96. He is now in a memory care facility. He's literally has a whole staff of people taking care of him, but he has never once had to take care of himself. But at the same time, my father was always a workaholic. And so that workaholism, the money aspect of it, for me, I was always looking to play in the arenas where boys could win. And I think that is the challenge of high-performing women, that you have to overprove your worth in every room that you're in. And that is how I've always felt. So it is kind of like the pick me mentality of like, can I please, for God's sakes, be chosen? You know, looking for men's approval, whether that is through dating. I was always waiting to be picked, you know, even though I could say no, and I would say no to a lot of guys, you know, but when I was dating, I was waiting to be picked. I was waiting for that guy to notice me. I was waiting for that employer to pick me. And so when I would work at ADP, DocuSign, Salesforce, and in these like high stakes technology sales roles, the pressure was really high. And most of the time I was one of one woman or one of two on a team, on any given team. It was predominantly male. And I felt really proud of that I could hang, you know, and I could, and was always looking for that kind of approval. And so I think that internalized sexism, I remember this. I remember this so well. I'm not going to say which company. I'm not going to say who it was, but it was somebody I used to work for. And I saw that he was interviewing a woman for a job. And because all the conference rooms were glass, you could see through them. And when I saw him later, I was like, hey, I saw that you were interviewing a woman. Bravo, we could use some more women. And he rolled his eyes and he's like, yeah, he's like, I mean, we try, but look at the scoreboard. All the ones that are winning are middle-aged white guys. He told this to me with boobs. He told this to my face with boobs. My face doesn't have boobs, but he told this to me in private. And I'm like, wow. And so when you hear that, when you see it in plain sight, of course you're going to internalize that, right? And so how does this look? Sometimes we attribute women's success to luck, you know, or their looks. Maybe we undermine leadership of saying that women are too aggressive, they're too much, or they are too emotional. You know, I think about Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown. I'm not sure if I'm getting all of her names. I think she has a third name, Justice Brown. And when she was being interviewed for her role as the Supreme Court Justice, she was asked the most sexist, racist, blatantly, like eviscerated up and down, and she would not break. Not for 1 second did she break and look too emotional or get mad or whatever. She was calm. She was even. She was direct. And that's what people want, right? They don't want all the emotional aspect of it. Then when you have somebody that is emotional, they get eviscerated for it, or that they aren't capable. And so I think that narrative really does need to change. I think when we police attire, criticizing another woman for being too revealing or too modest. I remember many years ago, this was my first job out of college, and I was working, I was probably 22 or something. And I remember my boss, who was a female, pulling me aside, and she said, oh no, it wasn't even my boss. It was somebody from another department, had said, Allison, some people in the office are saying that they feel like you're not wearing underwear underneath your clothes, and that's not appropriate. And I'm like, excuse me? And by the way, I was wearing underwear, and that was even before thongs. And so I was wearing full underwear. So I don't even know where this is coming from, but good Lord, like all of these microaggressions that happen so often. And that was from another woman leader saying, hey, you gotta wear something more appropriate, or, like not show your underwear. I don't even know. Like making commentary on people's bodies. This is an interesting piece now when I think about, commenting on a woman's weight gain or weight loss. Thinking about Ariana Grande in Wicked, that she had a significant weight drop where everyone is saying she's sick, she's ill, and maybe she is, but we're just not allowed to talk about it anymore. And I wonder, when I was talking to somebody who is building a personal brand, and she had a product that is supposed to like tighten your tush, and she was saying that legally you can't really do before and after pictures. You can't talk about weight loss anymore. Like it really is a changing landscape of what is acceptable and what is not, and what is coveted and what is not. So it's interesting to see, like, are we embracing our own bodies, while Ozempic and Wegovy, the weight loss drugs are coming into fashion, where people are just, they're dropping in weight and they look great. And the weird thing is, I don't know if it's weird, but there are so many benefits that it actually not only helps you lose weight, but it kind of regulates your brain in a better way, where it's helping people in so many other avenues. So, like this is a ... This is an ellipsis of like one to watch. But it is interesting about that, like enforcing traditional gender roles, shaming ambition, judging parenting choices. But I think that the part where we can really impact ourselves, I don't want to get too deep in the negative spiral here, because I'm like, I have so many instances where, I was kind of putting notes together for this, and I'm like, it is everywhere. But I think the self-directed misogyny is where we can really make the quickest impact. And part of that is devaluing yourself, like thinking I'm not good at this because I'm a woman, or feeling like you have to work twice as hard just to be taken seriously. And as a woman, that just is. And as a woman of color, that's even more so. So how if you were to do an audit for a week on self-directed misogyny and like devaluing yourself, how many times do you do that? And that might be something as innocuous as like, oh, there goes dumb old me. Or there goes my overthinking, obsessive, psychotic self. We devalue ourselves a lot. And some of it is in spirit of humor, of like self-deprecating humor. But I would wonder, what would it look like if we were kinder to ourselves, more consciously, and alleviated that? And honestly, I can't, like, there are times when my husband will walk in the bathroom and I'm like, fuck this. I'm so fat. What the fuck? Like, I'm like, how did I get so old? I'm so mad at myself, and he's like, Allison, come on. And he's right. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why are we holding ourselves up to a standard from 20 years ago, or a standard that doesn't even exist? And then I think the other aspect of like the self-directed misogyny is suppressing emotions, like dismissing your feelings as too much, apologizing, or being too sensitive. All of those things, I can't even tell you how many meetings I would be in where it would be like a weekly sales meeting with my boss, and it would take all of my might. If I was having a tough time or a tough season where I had to pull everything together and just tell myself, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Whatever you do, do not cry. Generally, I'm not a crier, but I also feel like I have a lot of tears that need to come out. And there is a lot of suppression of emotions that I think having a full spectrum of emotions are only going to help us love each other more and love ourselves more. So what do we do about this? Well, first of all, let's talk about self-reflection. Like, how can you look at yourself and assess your personal biases and behaviors? I promise you, people that are like, I never judge, I never, hate on anybody, bullshit. Yes, you do. And even if it is in your head, and I get it, like, it's human. The goal is not to go down to zero, because I think that denies how we really feel, or even acknowledging that we might feel envy, or we might feel jealous, or we might feel insecure. And I think giving space to that, as we are in the reinvention room, we're always taking up space, but giving space to what it looks like to say, I'm really lonely, or I'm really sad. I was thinking about my own friendships. Oh, why am I doing this? So I was thinking about my own friendships. Maybe I'll do an episode on this later. But I was thinking about, if I'm angry, I know who to call. I have people to call. I personally feel like I've got a lot of friends. I personally feel like I'm generally well liked, and if I'm not, I don't hear about it. And that's whatever. Okay. I know I'm not for everybody. I do come off as a lot, right? See, there I go, like self-deprecating. But who do I call when I'm sad? I don't have anybody to call when I'm sad. And that tells me, and again, I'm working on it, right? Like I'm actively kind of, recategorizing some of the people in my life, people that I want to get to know better, people that I want to invest more in. I feel like I have been so guarded in friendships that I haven't even shown up as myself. So of course I'm not that close to people. It's something I carry a lot of shame and guilt about, but something that I'm actively working through. And as you can see, I'm talking about it openly because I know that I'm not alone here. I know I'm not alone. I look at the moms groups, and there are so many in these moms groups that post anonymously that say, I'm so lonely. I wish I had friends. I know I have people that I like and that I like being around, but I want something deeper. I want somebody I can laugh and be silly with. I want somebody to be playful with. I want somebody that, I won't feel bad saying, can you watch my kid while I go work out? And I would do the same for them. I think there is such a separation of us trying to hold these masks. And I think in your 40s and 50s, there is this process of unmasking that just happens. That's why this is called the reinvention room, that you're either going to be forced to reinvent, and or you're going to reinvent. And my hope and my dream is that you get as much choice as possible to reinvent yourself on your own terms. And when you don't have choice, how do you make the best of it? And so I think that self-reflection is really important. I would invite you to audit yourself for a week. How do you talk to yourself? How do you talk about other people? I think there's something else. I may even do a whole podcast about this because I think it's so interesting. There's something called the liking gap. Liking, Liking, the liking gap. It's a phenomenon where individuals underestimate how much others like them after social interaction. So how many times have you gone to an event or gone to a dinner and you're like, oh, why didn't I shut up? Why did I say that? I should have said this better. Especially if it's like a confrontation or something else, some kind of setting, I should have done, why didn't I say all of those things? But research shows, and this was something in Vogue actually, but there's actually multiple. I have like multiple sources, which is why I'm like, I think I should do an interview. I think I should do a whole episode on it. But they said that people often believe they are less well-liked than they truly are, which means that we have such a big disparity between self-perception and how others see us. It's kind of like when we, and there are people that I just love, and I get to the point where somebody just pops in my head, and I've kind of trained myself to text them and say, hey, Brandy, I'm thinking about you. You just popped into my head. What's new and exciting? Would love to reconnect, whatever. And every single time I do that, I'm like, do they really want to hear from me? Am I going to be annoying? Why do we do that to ourselves? So I think there is some self-reflection that needs to be done. I also think it's important to promote positive narratives. And so when you're in a group, I automatically think of mom groups. Sometimes when I get together with other moms, it can easily devolve into bitching about the school's crossing guard or the principal or this teacher or whatever, or just gossiping about other moms that, well, they've been, like they're always the ones to be yelling and complaining, like those kind of things. What if we can put a positive spin on it? That if we are the tuning fork, right? You are the tuning fork of your life, meaning you set the vibration. And so when you are vibrating at a higher frequency, it's kind of like when two tuning forks hit each other, they make a sound and then they vibrate together and they move up. And so that's the same kind of thing here about promoting positive narratives and being more, perhaps putting a better spin on it. And of course, having support systems. And I think part of that is being mindful of where you do spend your time and energy. I have found that I don't really love when people sit around and gossip. I mean, certainly I can be guilty of it from time to time, but that is not what I want to talk about almost ever. And I love being with people who want to talk about problem solving. I want to talk to people who are looking at psychology of things and solving interesting problems and care about stuff. I love mission-driven people. And so I put myself in places where I'm surrounded by people like that. And that really helps. And then the fourth thing is like educational initiatives, like engaging in meaningful discussions and workshops. And even you listening to this podcast is perfect. Is like, what if you went deeper? What if you went 2 layers deeper? What if you did some research or went on ChatGPT and asked questions about why is this the way that it is? Because the more that we know about this, the more we can kind of help that really we are the only ones that we can control. In the words of Mel Robbins, let them hate on other people. But if we can be the tuning fork and if we only have control of ourselves, then so be it. Let's be better versions of ourselves. So I'm curious, how does all of this show up for you? What have you noticed about yourself? What have you noticed about others? Like even in this conversation. And while you're there, let's keep this conversation going. I hope you share this episode with a friend who you might think is a Judgy McJudgerson and have a conversation about it, have something meaningful. I think the great thing that I'm so proud of Reinvention Room and what, the goal of this is that every single one of these episodes are going to be a conversation starter for you, something meaningful to talk about, something meaningful to discuss, consider, change, push back, whatever it is to make your life better, to make your life more purposeful, more meaningful, to have you feel seen and heard. So share this with a friend or 5. Share this on your networks. I would appreciate it if you tag me. I love that. It's how I know that these episodes are resonating. It is truly the biggest currency for me. And if you are craving a reinvention of your own, which may include launching your own podcast as a part of your personal brand, or maybe you're going through a big transition or a career change, or you're looking to maybe take this on yourself, book a call with me. I'm offering free strategy calls where, and they're no pressure, where we kind of take your ideas and we flesh them out. And if there is an opportunity for us to work together and it makes sense and we're a good fit, I'll show you what that looks like. And if I am not a good fit and there's a better resource, I'm going to do everything in my power to point you in that resource. And you can book a call with me at AllisonHare.com/schedule, and I'll link it in the show notes. And I would love to help you turn what's next into what's now. Until next time, I've loved this topic. I leave you with a loving reminder to spread your arms wide, take up more space, create a room big enough to hold every beautiful inch of your dreams and desires to create the life you want on your own terms, because you deserve it. I'm Allison Hare. Thanks for hanging out with me in the Reinvention Room.